It's time for the Postmortem Report with your hosts Ronald McGilray and Michael Schotter. Each month, these sultans of speculative fiction take a break from bending reality to ask one burning question. What cool stuff got buried in the social media graveyard while people were busy yelling at each other? Well, there's only one way to find out, so let's dig into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Postmortem Report. I'm your co-host, Michael Schotter.
And I'm Ronald McGilvery. Welcome to episode 12. Can you imagine? It's been a year.
I know, we've done a dozen of these. Well, are in the process of doing a dozen of these. I can hardly even fathom that.
Just think, when it all started, we were just young men then.
Mm-hmm. Remember when I first contacted you through email and you just thought I was like some random internet stalker?
Yeah. I was like, oh, someone wants to talk to me. That's great.
Typical post-pandemic reaction to social interaction.
Yeah. It was funny because we probably talked about it in the past, but it was when it first happened, I was like, oh, I don't know. Does anyone want to look at my mug? And we're talking to Martha's going, get out of your, whatever you call it, get out of your comfort zone.
I don't know, though. You can't get out of the comfort zone. That's kind of your thing here.
Yeah. So I said, all right, just give it a try. Get out of your comfort zone, try something new. I said, okay. So
yeah, I don't think we've ever actually really talked about that publicly, like the origins of all of this. But maybe we'll have to do that at some point. Maybe we can go into like the full like background on how this whole crazy train got rolling. But yeah, how are things going otherwise? You've been getting your steps in?
Yeah, been doing my steps. I've what am I at today? I'm only at about 2,500 today because I've been doing some other stuff. But
I know you usually crush me pretty thoroughly when I do bother to look. Your totals are usually significantly higher than mine. But I usually try to get in that like 3 to 4K a day range. That's kind of what I shoot for. I usually hit that pretty good.
Well, it's just any kind of movement, and because I'm doing my physio as well right now for my shoulder, I find working out with that has lent itself to doing sort of extended workouts with other things. I figured, well, I'm already down here and I got to do that, so I might as well do other stuff. I'm trying to get fit, so I'll be able to fit into that Speedo come summer.
Yeah. Well, we got to get you in fighting shape for StokerCon, which actually, by the time folks see this, will have been to StokerCon and back. So maybe if you're really lucky, we'll have a little StokerCon footage for you somewhere in this episode. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
We'll see. So yeah, it's doing the standing. We'll be in the dealer's room. Excuse me, my allergies are acting up. But 4 days of standing. So I'm getting my walks in, getting those exercises in. I want to be in tip-top shape.
Yep. Well, you've got an event coming up here pretty soon after we're recording this, right? So that'll be like a good practice session for live human interaction.
Yeah, it's actually heading to Toronto by train. Haven't been on a train in a long time. Yeah, so we're heading to Toronto tomorrow. We head out by train, get in around 4:30 in the afternoon. On Saturday, it's the 10th anniversary for Andrew Pyper's book, The Demonologist.
Nice.
So it'll be exciting. There'll be hopefully some authors there that I haven't seen in a while. Get a signed book of The Demonologist from Andrew. Steve Stredd is hosting it. It's at Little Ghosts
Yeah. I was gonna say, is
the
a
horror
Little
bookstore.
Ghosts bookstore involved in
Yeah.
that? Yeah,
So,
nice.
being like almost 5 hours away, I look at it and I go, God, I wish I had one of those in our community. So this is a
Hmm.
good opportunity to be able to go and browse. Maybe I go earlier on the Saturday or maybe the Friday evening and grab some books while I'm there. But it'll be
Hmm.
fun to see it and hopefully see some people there that I've only met online.
Yeah. Well, when you see some of those people in person, you could wish them a belated happy birthday if you were so inclined.
I could if I could remember their
Yeah.
birthdays.
Well, everybody's got one. Everybody gets
Yeah,
one, right?
yeah. So I'll
You
go,
don't have to be
hey, happy
specific
belated
about it.
birthday. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that'd be a good go-to way to greet people that you've never met in person before. It's
yeah,
like a good conversation starter.
yeah, yeah. Hey, just wanted to wish you a happy belated birthday. And they just kind of look at you funny and I'd say, well, you don't get it. You don't watch the postmortem report and kind of guilt them into subscribing
Yes.
and watching.
For shame. For
Yeah,
shame.
yeah. That's what I should have done. I should have had shirts made. So when I go
Mhm.
there to Toronto, have you watched the postmortem report? Of course, I just thought of it now.
Yeah.
Bad planning on my part.
Missed opportunities all around. But you know
Uh,
what? Let's not miss another opportunity to do some birthdays.
all right, so it's birthday time.
Oh yeah.
All righty. Well, let's start off with Bob Cowan. Actually, a friend of mine. I've known him for quite a while. His birthday was May 2nd. He just wrapped up 21 years as the co-host for Morning Live at CHCH.
Wow.
He's a funny guy. Um, I hope he had a great birthday. Um, all the best in your retirement, and I'll see you on the interweb. So happy birthday, Bob. Another birthday, Adam Hulse, May 4th, author of the new book, Below Economic Thresholds. So
It's
you
a
want to
very
be checking
intriguing
that one out.
cover on that book.
Yeah, yeah. So happy birthday to Adam. Um, on May 7th, Villimey Mist, the author of the Nocturnal series, has a birthday. So I wish her all the best. Happy birthday. I believe she's from Iceland.
Oh,
Not that
cool.
has anything to do with birthdays, but it's just cool. I don't really know a lot of people from Iceland.
Right.
So,
Cool international flavor. Yeah.
yeah. And the Nocturnal series, her vampire books are really cool. So, if you haven't read them yet, check it out. Make her birthday all the better. Rick Hipson, his birthday's May 19th. Happy birthday, Rick. He's, of course, the Dark Bites, has the Dark Bites blog. He also has the podcast for Dark Bites. He's also a contributor to Rue Morgue. So happy birthday to Rick. All the best. Coy Hall. His birthday is May 21st. So happy birthday to Coy. His new book, A Pantheon of Thieves and Other Weird Tales.
Yep. Just picked
Yeah,
that one up myself.
yeah.
Looking forward to diving into that at some point here.
It's it now. Getting a lot of traction on that interweb. Seeing it. It's a cool looking cover.
Hmm.
So happy birthday to Coy. And Angel Van Atta. May 22nd is her birthday. Author of The Children and the Gods and her newest Leviathan Rising. Um, so happy birthday to Angel. Happy birthday to all the people. And if we missed you in any of the 12 months that we've been doing it, happy belated birthday from Michael and I at the Postmortem Report. Take it away, Michael.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we've been, as you say, doing this for quite some time now, and we've got some definite traditions around here that we've established. They're sort of just the things we do, and of course, it's now time to share with you a fun little advertisement that we think you may find. What's that noise? You hear that noise?
That doesn't sound good.
Come on, we better get to the bunker.
No, I've seen what's in your bunker.
Oh, don't worry, I took care of that.
I guess I don't really have a choice.
I've got chicken fingers.
So let's go. So much dust.
That was close. Much closer than I would have preferred, but I think we're good.
Well, you haven't been getting those steps in.
Yeah, we definitely got some steps in. Oh man. So yeah, that happened.
Unexpectedly.
Indeed. Oh crap. Did you bring the script?
No. I think I left it upstairs. I was like too concerned bringing all my stuff down. All my poster. I mean, I was going to lose that.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good decision making, I would say.
I don't have
well, I guess we could kind of improvise something, although whoever's watching this may have more pressing concerns. Maybe we should do something to help people deal with this situation.
Like a public service thing.
Yeah, what do you think we should do first?
Well, let's keep it simple. Let's talk about the end of the world.
Seems legit.
It's apocalypse time. Episode 12. I guess I shouldn't be as happy, but I didn't know if I'd be able to get myself all my stuff down. Those are some steep stairs.
Yeah, I'm really impressed that you were able to hang stuff so straight. I was really expecting at least a few things to be crooked, but good job.
Well, I'm pretty
maintaining
vain.
Continuity. Although you are a continuity expert, so
yes,
I'd expect nothing less.
I do not like continuity issues. Pet peeve of mine. Plus, I'm only like filming from my shoulders down because the sweat stains are just horrendous from all that running.
Yeah, nobody wants to experience what's happening below our chests at this point. That third leg that I grew as I was, being exposed to the radiation is just not something anyone needs to see.
Apocalypse is not fun. Yeah. Except today's.
All of those books and movies lied to me.
Yeah.
Well, let's make the most of it. So
where do you want to start?
I know.
I'm all ears.
Let's watch a movie.
Sounds good.
What do you think we should watch?
I think we should watch Mad Max.
Excellent. I like the optimism too, because that's sort of like a post-apocalyptic film, right? Sort of implying that you've survived the apocalypse and you're ready to move on in whatever hellish landscape remains.
Exactly. You got cool cars, get to hang out with
Mm-hmm.
cool buddies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Seems pretty fun to
Very
me.
cool ending, which I won't spoil, but man, does that ending stick with you once you've seen it.
Yeah, yeah, it's something. So what do you think? Should we talk a little bit about Mad Max?
Yes, yes. So what would how would you pitch this movie to your fellow apocalypse survivors as like something they should put on their to watch list?
Well, it's got a very young, very cool Mel Gibson.
Yes, pre-crazy Mel Gibson,
Yeah,
one might say.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I saw actually before the end came about, I saw a post by Carla, and she'd posted it, and I was thinking, huh, I hadn't really thought of them because I have all three of the trilogy on DVD, and I
Hmm.
always mean to check it out, but I don't. But it was, George Miller did it. It was Australian. I heard actually that when they first made the movie, when they brought it over to play it in the States, they had American actors do voiceovers
Mm.
because of the Australian accents. They were worried no one would get it.
Huh. Interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that version of it. As I recall, the Australian accents were always very heavy and prominent in all the versions that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, most people too aren't even all that familiar with Mad Max, except for the Road Warrior. Because a lot of people think Road Warrior is like the first
Yeah, yeah,
movie.
because that was where it really blew up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Mad Max. I mean, when I first saw it, it was one of those defining moments. It's like this is cool. Like the whole apocalypse idea was kind of really neat.
Hmm.
They had all those characters. Like I'm trying to think of all the names. There was like the Knight Rider, opens it up, and Toe Cutter and Bubba, and and it was like I think it was oil wars, if I remember correctly, and the whole economy collapsed, and I guess the wars just ravaged the earth, and I guess Australia being so far out kind of missed majority of that, and
Hmm.
then their economy eventually collapsed as well,
Hmm.
and I can't remember what the police force was. It started with an M or something, but Mad Max, he was part of what was left of, I guess, the last remaining police force that was trying to keep the highways safe,
Hmm.
and it was just a thankless position. Because I
Yeah.
think his whole right, he was like having a dilemma in his mind because I think he was enjoying it too much because I think he tried to retire, tried to resign, didn't he? I think at the
Yeah, I mean,
beginning.
it's been a minute since I've seen it, but I
Yeah,
recall that being the whole gist is that he wanted to be out and then he got
yeah,
pulled back in, as so
yeah,
often happens in movies.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, because
yeah,
he had that really cool car that was like faster than every other car,
yeah, the
and he just
Interceptor, I think it was
yeah
called. Yeah.
he was just like a natural, and but he just said that he was enjoying it too much, and he was becoming no different than all the gangs out there, so he
Hmm.
wanted out.
Hmm.
But things take a turn, and he's dragged back in,
Hmm.
and violence ensues.
Yeah, kind of once the switch gets flipped, and it's kind of on, as the kids say, or I guess used to say before we all started glowing in the dark. Um, yeah, things kind of go a little bit off the rails, and again, like kind of going back to the ending, which I know I've already mentioned it previously, but like that last like 10 minutes of that movie is something that like burned its way into my brain. Like I remember seeing that as a kid, and like you cannot unsee that last scene, right? Like once you've seen it, it's in your brain forever because it's just so crazy and unexpected in a way, and just iconic. To dust off one of our favorite words, I feel
Yeah.
like that scene like is so memorable and so like impactful. Even going back and watching it today, I think it still hits really hard and works really well in terms of like summing up the whole like theme of the movie and everything.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I loved all three of them. I know, Beyond Thunderdome didn't get a lot of love, but I think it's just because I love the character so much and the whole
Hmm.
idea behind it. I mean, if you
Hmm.
just came in and Beyond Thunderdome was your first one, maybe I
Hmm.
could see it might be, a miss for some. But if you're caught up in the whole, storyline and the mythos on it, uh,
Hmm.
it didn't really matter. It was Mad Max.
Yeah. Well, and I am also a huge Tina Turner fan, so like having her in Thunderdome definitely was a big plus for me.
Yeah, and her song "Who Needs
Hmm.
Another Hero" is really good as well.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, I liked it. I don't know, the outfits that they wore was kind of cool. The characters were all very different as well. They just didn't have like just cardboard cutout characters. They were all very distinct and
Yeah. A lot of
creepy.
personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was thinking about it as we were discussing it, and it occurs to me just how much those films probably ended up influencing other things that we enjoy, like video games. Like, because I was thinking about like how much the Borderlands series of video games is probably like really heavily influenced by Mad Max. Because you
Yeah.
look at a lot of things from those games, almost seem like direct riffs on things from those films in retrospect.
Yeah.
But
Ahead of its
yeah,
time.
yeah.
It came out of Australia too.
Hmm.
Not that that's like a surprise or anything, but for back then too, it was from to have something from Australia come out and become so big, something that
Hmm.
wasn't like in the Hollywood grist mill.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
Yeah,
That sure
definitely,
made Mel Gibson a big star.
probably worked to its advantage a little bit, I would say, because it
Yeah.
was, as you say, a bit unexpected.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, very cool flick and very cool series. And of course, we haven't even talked about, the reboot of all of that stuff, which I actually have never seen.
Oh,
But
really?
of course, I think that introduced like a whole new generation of people to that concept. Yeah.
Fury Road. I didn't mind it. It was pretty good.
Hmm. Yeah, I know a lot of people really like it. I'm so content with the original films. I never really had a
Yeah.
strong desire to see it. But yeah, I definitely think it's cool that it exists, if for no other reason that it probably put that franchise back on a lot of people's radar and
Yeah.
introduced it to a lot of people who probably never would have been exposed to it otherwise. So,
Yeah. It was the opposite because where I said, well, I like Beyond Thunderdome
mhm.
because I liked everything else. I'm thinking, this one I enjoyed, but it wasn't as good because for what made me like Beyond Thunderdome was because of the whole mythos and the building of each kind of movie, where this one was completely different, didn't have, Mel
Mhm.
Gibson. So it was
Sure,
good, but it didn't have the same kind of like, not the
didn't
same
hit the
love that
same
I
way
had.
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But it was definitely cool in its own right.
yeah. Well, it's kind of like that for a new generation. I guess it would be a way to think of it. Um, so we got our movies, and they get their movies, and everybody's happy.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't know. I think it's a wonderful way to start your apocalyptic journey.
Yeah, yeah. Although I would say, we're probably going to need to pick some things that are a bit longer because we got a lot of time to kill all of a sudden. So maybe we should talk about some TV shows that kind of fit this reality.
Sure, we could do that. Did you want me to go ahead? Because I have one in mind.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Let us know what you have.
Well, my pick, if I had to, if we have time, as long as electricity keeps going, your generator's working, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got plenty of fuel.
Perfect. Well, then I would suggest we watched 12 Monkeys.
Ooh.
Not the movie, which the movie is really good. Love the
I was
movie
gonna
as
say I
well.
love the movie, but I have
Yeah,
never seen the series.
yeah. The series is really good as well. It has James Cole, who's in the future, like 2043, like that, and the world's ravaged by a plague that was made and inflicted on the world by the 12 monkey, the army of the 12 monkeys. I was going to say the 12 monkey army, but that didn't sound right. So like the army of the 12 monkeys.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
James Cole is living in this wasteland, and he's brought in by this a scientist, and they've come up with this form of a time travel, and they'd used whatever mechanism they had, and they got uh, picked up a recording, and the recording was from a Dr. Cassandra Rayleigh, and she mentioned that she helped figure out who started this thing, and she mentions this Cole. So this scientist in like 2043, they go out and find this Cole guy and bring him in, and they figured, well, obviously they must have in another parallel sent him back because that's the only way this doctor would have ever met him. So they knew he was, because they were sending, I guess, their own people back to try to find the leaders of the army of the 12 monkeys. So they get
Hmm.
a hold of this Cole, and they send him back, and he uh, meets up with this Dr. Rayleigh, and they go, it's he goes back to 2015 because 2017 is when the plague hits. So they were only off by what, 3 years
Yeah,
when
shockingly close
when COVID.
yeah,
Yeah,
to reality there.
yeah. So they go trying to find um, you know the leaders of the army of the 12 monkeys and try to prevent this plague from happening. And it's actually really good. I thought they did really good job because they had a lot to live up to with the movie.
Hmm. For sure.
So
Yeah.
it's a really cool idea. It's
Yeah.
time travel. There's plague. There's end of the world stuff. There's the adventure and the mystery of who it is. Once
Hmm.
again, lots of cool characters.
Nice. Well, that's one of those shows that I've always kind of had on my to watch list because I am a pretty big fan of the original film.
Yeah,
And so now that we've got all this time on our hands, that is probably something that's going to happen. So good pick on that one.
thank you.
But
What about you?
you just made me think like if I had to pick like what would be my number one like go to post-apocalyptic TV series, I think I would probably have to go with a little show called Jericho,
That was a good
which
series.
yeah had a very tumultuous run during its
Yeah,
short lifespan. It's actually brought back from the dead after its first season due to like a uh, pretty intense fan outcry and campaign to bring it back for a second season. But basically, it's about sort of a nuclear holocaust, for lack of a better term, that takes place in the United States through a particular set of circumstances, and then it's just sort of people dealing with the aftermath of that. And I think that show is really exceptionally well done and definitely like one of my favorite uh, more modern TV shows. And I always thought it was a real shame and a real crime that it didn't get to run its course on TV the way that it probably should have. Uh, but I am really glad that we got the two seasons that we got. and that they did manage to complete the story arc for that in a series of comic books that were eventually published. So people who kind of got left hanging when the show got canceled for the second time have at least that to kind of quench their thirst for more.
It was pretty. It's been a long time since I've watched it. At the beginning, though, didn't they have a pretty dramatic, like, representation of the sort of the nuclear bombs going off?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole setup, right, is there's this guy who's going back to visit his family in the town that he grew up in, this little town of Jericho, and he kind of goes about his business, does what he's there to do, and then he decides he's going to leave. He's like, yeah, this was a mistake. This isn't right for me. I should never come back here. And as he's rolling out of town, the mushroom clouds start going off in the background, and he actually ends up getting blinded by the flash and wrecking his car, and then ends up in a situation where he's like taking care of a bunch of kids who were trapped on a school bus after their bus driver gets incapacitated by the blast. And that kind of leads him back into like rejoining that community and dealing with all of the aftermath, because basically the town was far enough away from, the major cities that got hit, that it is basically able to go on and persist and function as it had been for the most part, other than some obvious issues like power and water and that sort of thing that would be a result of something like that happening. But it's really a fascinating examination, I think, that show, of how people might actually deal with a situation like that if it were to occur. And I always thought that was like one of the coolest parts of it, is how just realistic and grounded and like believable the whole scenario was, and the way it was portrayed.
Yeah, for some reason, I remember sort of the haunting, like when the bombs went off. Remember that kind of really haunting. But growing up, the time frame that I have too, that was always something that was always in the back of our heads. Like 70s and 80s, we always figured we were going to get hit then.
Yep.
So yeah, it was like that. The movie, The Day After.
The Day After, yeah, very similar vibe to that for sure, especially in that first episode. Yeah.
When you see all the people putting up their laundry and the missiles are like flying out of the silos, and then you see the bomb.
No, there was a very, very real, like, I think it's probably really difficult for people who were born and raised like after those times to even relate to what that was actually like to live through. But like even myself, being born in the 70s and growing up throughout like the 70s and 80s, that was still very much a thing, right? It was still very, very much a thing that was like a constant concern in the back of your head, like no matter what else was going on. Like there was always that thought, like, is today going to be the day?
Yeah.
And then, of course, we had things like in the 80s, things like War Games and Terminator and all sorts of things that like very much echoed those ideas, that were so pervasive throughout society and culture and whatnot. But we
had the big sirens on our roof on the schools.
Oh, you mean like that one we heard earlier?
Yeah. That's why I knew exactly what it was.
Yeah, you knew exactly what to do. Yeah,
when they did those tests, get under the table. That'll save you.
Duck and cover.
Yeah. So Jericho,
But yeah, great show. Sadly canceled way before its time, but definitely still worth a watch. Especially those 2 seasons are all great stuff. If you ever get the chance to see them.
Good pick.
And actually, I realized that we had some other stuff that we were going to talk about too, that I kind of skipped over because of all the chaos and everything. And something else that we probably have the time to do now that we've had a chance to catch our breath is to do a little bit of reading.
Yes.
And so I definitely wanted to mention something that I just recently finished reading conveniently, which is the Screaming for Peace anthology that my bunker mate here actually has a story featured in, as I'm sure you all are well aware, because you watch every episode religiously and heard us talk about this in the previous one.
Yeah.
But I've actually had the chance to read the whole thing now, and I can say pretty conclusively that it is definitely something that people should check out. I enjoyed it thoroughly and would highly recommend it. Unfortunately, if you find a copy of it now, it's probably going to be glowing in the dark, but that'll just make the cover look cooler.
You can always read it on ebook.
Yeah, that's safer. That seems way safer.
As long as the internet keeps going.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, the internet was specifically built to survive this very scenario.
Yeah. So, our ebooks should live on forever.
Sweet.
Yeah. And I was very proud of being part of Screaming for Peace. It's a great anthology, and glad you picked up a copy. Thanks for supporting a good cause.
Yeah, no problem. So, what would you pick as maybe something to dust off in a situation like this, reading wise?
Well, I don't want to, all this, especially what we just went through, it's horrific enough. I thought I probably want something a bit different. I don't want to be bombed again. I don't want to deal with any more, mushroom clouds. So an end of the world, though, can end in many ways. And this one actually always freaked me out. Now, of course, maybe it's because when I first, actually watched the movie and read the book, I was much younger. But the whole idea behind it freaked me out. And that's Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. Actually, I saw a post the other day by Michael Sellers. He had it. I was browsing through things, and I noticed a post, and I started thinking about it again. Because the book is, it's obviously very similar to the movie, but the ending, much different. Night and day. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't watched the movie or read the book, I won't spoil it for you, but it is, you can actually do both, because sometimes you go, well, I'm reading the book, and then you watch a show and it's exactly the same, kind of like Game of Thrones kind of thing. So I've heard a lot of people who watched the series first, then tried to read the books, and it was like, well, it's just the same thing.
So, yeah, although with Game of Thrones, there is a lot of additional stuff in the books that, like, kind of, especially like a lot of the more magical, like supernatural stuff, they kind of tone that back in the show and cut a lot of that out. But yeah, the basic plot threads tend to be very similar, at least the things that they didn't cut out.
Yeah. And I guess they tacked on their own ending, because we're still waiting for his ending.
Yeah, George.
Unbelievable. Because we know you're watching, so get on it.
Yeah.
After you watch the episode, because we're not done yet. So
yes, we'll let you know when you can finish. We'll let you finish.
Exactly. So Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the whole concept behind that, if you don't know already, is that these pods grow. They kind of like these seeds were on the winds of space, and they land on Earth, and they grow to these flowers, and the flowers kind of spray this thing at you, and then it makes a replica of you. And then as the duplicate of you emerges from the pod, you, and the real you, withers away and dies. And then this duplicate takes over as you. And so I guess their whole idea is they're going to make the world a better place by being these passive conformist pod people. And I guess if you just happen to be smelling one of the flowers and just turn at the beginning, it wouldn't be so bad because you wouldn't even know what happened. But when you realize that your best friend or your wife or your husband isn't the real deal anymore, and you know it's going to happen, I don't know. That whole idea freaks me out. It's just like, who's real, who's not, who can you trust, who can't you trust, you know? And then of course you're also running for your life because you don't want to be turned into a pod person where you actually die. And it was really a good book. I just about slipped up and said something about the ending.
Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think that's a very cool one to bring up just because of the different endings and the way you could, like you said, experience the book and then experience the film or vice versa and get like a very different experience because of the changes to the ending. So I think that's a really cool one to double dip on potentially.
Yeah. And for end of the world stuff too, it's like you get so much, it was like, you know, there's big bangs, lots of explosions, lots of gangs, lots of like violence. This one's a very docile takeover. It's creepy because no one knows it's even happening, kind of thing. So
yeah, it's creepy how low key it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just they slowly just take over. So yeah, and so long ago I read it, and it still to this day, and I've watched almost all of the incarnations of the films that they've put out. There was one actually with a Nicole Kidman. It might have been just called Invasion. I even liked that one.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Yeah, I had that. The concept's really cool.
Very cool. Well, speaking of concepts, another thing that we're going to have a lot of time to do in our current situation is listen to some thematically appropriate music.
Mood music.
You have the soundtrack of your life. This is going to be the soundtrack of your apocalypse. And I think you have a really cool thing to bring up, which I definitely would say is a very spot on sort of thing to bring up in this circumstance, which is Two Tribes by Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Who always wants to have like a downer apocalypse? Why not have like an upbeat, happy apocalyptic song? You can dance.
I don't know if I call that song happy as much as energetic. Because especially when you tie the visuals, like with the music video to it, I don't think there's much happiness going on in that situation, as I recall. It's more about just the sheer like adrenaline pumping chaos of it. But your mileage may vary.
Yeah, it's a good song though. I hadn't thought of it in years. It's because most of the time when you're thinking Frankie about Hollywood, people think the song "Relax."
Yeah, definitely the bigger hit, I would say, from that album.
Yeah, and this I was once again browsing through stuff, and I saw a post by the '80s girl, and she had Two Tribes. So I played it, and I actually had forgotten about the video, how they had like the mock Reagan and was it Khrushchev?
So it's really interesting because the guy they got to play the Russian leader actually almost kind of looks like a cross between like Khrushchev and Gorbachev and Yeltsin, which is really funny because Yeltsin didn't even become president of Russia until much later. But it's like it's almost like prophetic because when you look at that dude, he almost kind of looks like Boris Yeltsin.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to remember it, and I was thinking, which leader was it? Because they did all sort of mix in. They have that sort of wrestling.
Well, because the guy that they got to play the American president kind of almost looks like a Wall Street kind of executive type, in addition to having like the sort of the Reagan-esque appearance as well. So it's kind of, again, similarly prophetic.
Yeah, I remember the beginning too when it comes. It's very kind of like the eerie intro, and
Mhm.
then of course it's they have that sort of bombastic kind of tie-in, and then they have the sirens and that the voice. That's another thing in end of the world stuff when they have like the radio voiceovers, you
Mhm.
know, stuff that's always haunted me. Even in like Night of the Living Dead, where they're, you know, you watching the TV and they're talking, that's always kind of creeped me out too. You know, just the you know, the warning. This is your like an emergency warning system kind of thing. It just
Yeah.
kind of is like it's something you never want to hear.
Well, there are certain things that just have this inherent triggering quality to them, right?
Yeah,
And it's funny because, you know, we have this law down here in the US where like you're not allowed to use the emergency broadcast system tone in anything fake, right?
yeah,
Like in any sort of fictional type reenactment or anything like that, because
yeah,
people are so skewed to that sound to
yeah,
register it as being an actual emergency that they don't want anybody to misuse it. And it
yeah,
just goes to show, though, like that's just basically a tone. You know, it's a multi-tone or a polytone, but it's so iconic and so immediately recognizable, and it
yeah,
produces such an immediate sort of visceral effect in people who hear it. It's like
yeah,
you can hear that sound and you will literally just drop whatever you're doing and be like, I need to pay attention to this because this could be like
yeah.
a life or death situation.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
It's it reminds me. Oh God, I can't think of what year it was. Nothing to do with the sound, but it was um there was that fake warning
The missile warning
in
in Hawaii.
Hawaii. That's what it
Yes.
was, Hawaii. I
Yeah.
remember that. And I was thinking because they had the it was I don't know if they had the sound, but I remember the emergency broadcast.
Well,
This
everybody
is
got
not an
notifications
emergency.
on their phones because that was
Yeah,
the whole thing. It was like a test of the emergency notification system that didn't appear to be a test.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it said there's not a test. There's a ICBM missile directed towards Hawaii. Take shelter. I mean, could you
Mhm.
imagine?
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, obviously we don't have to because we just experienced it, but I mean, to see that we didn't even get a warning. We just heard
Yeah.
that sound. But
Yeah.
to
Phone. What's up with that?
yeah,
Stupid phone.
I know, useless. But I was just, I mean, to see something like that, I can't even imagine what you'd be thinking. You know?
Yeah. You'd be thinking, where's the bunker?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I'm sure people would like some people who are like really easily terrified stuff would you know consider like committing suicide and stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
I wouldn't think that that would be an impossibility. Yeah.
yeah, it's just yeah, I don't know. It's just something when we were talking about it just triggered. I remembered that back, thinking, my God, that must have been a horror show back then because it was
Mhm.
like
Well, and that wasn't
15
even all that
minutes.
long ago that
Yeah,
that
it was in the
happened.
2000s, but I don't
Yeah, because
remember
that was
when.
well, it was post smartphones, right? Because it happened on people's smartphones, so it had to have been after
Okay,
2008. But I think it was actually the mid 20 teens, if I recall correctly. It was not that long ago. I bet it wasn't even 10 years ago that happened.
Hmm.
Um,
That'd have been horrifying.
yeah, no doubt.
So,
Um,
what about you? You got any music
but
you want to
well,
be
getting
listening
back
to?
to the whole post-apocalyptic music theme, I wanted to throw something out here, which I thought was a really great opportunity to talk about one of my favorite music artists, who is Billy Idol, because he did a pretty cool concept album back in the early 90s called Cyberpunk. And among many things, what that album does is kind of paints a pretty vivid sonic portrait of a possible future, kind of like where technology evolved in a very similar fashion to what it seems to be evolving into today, which again, to dust off this word one more time for the episode, was very, I think, prophetic. In that album, I think predicted a lot of things that are in the process of happening today and are very likely in the process of happening in the future, based on how things are kind of going. And of course, he had a ton of really putting influences, everything from like cyberpunk literature, like Neuromancer and Snow Crash and things like that to work from. But he also had things like the cyberpunk role-playing game, like the pen and paper role-playing game was a big inspiration for that album, and a bunch of other things, throughout popular culture. So I'm not saying he came up with all that stuff in a vacuum, but just the way that he put that all together in the context of that project is very, very cool. And especially when you listen to it now, understanding how very much on point a lot of the concepts and ideas that he laid out in that album like 30 years ago actually ended up being, it's pretty amazing, and definitely worth a listen, I think.
You can never go wrong with Billy Idol.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a hit single from that album, which was Shock to the System, which you may have heard of.
Yeah.
Not one of his bigger hit records, but certainly a hit for him. And that fits and slots very nicely into that overall concept album. So if nothing else, you've got at least that one sort of quote unquote pop song to enjoy from that.
Fine pick.
Yeah. So
Billy Idol, Frankie Goes to Hollywood night.
yeah, I mean, I feel like those two kind of inhabit a very similar space in my brain and heart. So it's not a stretch, right, to bounce back and forth between them.
Did you bring the beer down?
You assumed that the beer wasn't already here.
You were a good planner. Perfect. Because, when I like to have some beer when I'm listening to my Billy Idol.
Mm-hmm. More.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can never have enough.
Nice. No, that's the cure.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
we regress.
Yeah, no, that's after the mutation continues.
Yeah.
But I think to kind of wrap things up here, maybe we should talk a little bit about how we actually did all these wonderful preparations and how we made ourselves ready to experience this. Let's just face it, this pretty gnarly event that we've just gone through. And I think there's been one and only one thing that I can really credit for my absolutely impeccable planning and execution of this whole scenario, and that is my vast experience with video games. Because video games have taught me how to deal with just about every situation possible in life.
That's right, parents. Let your kids play video games. It's the right thing to do. Another public service announcement by the Postmortem Report.
Legit. So what video game do you think best prepared you for this situation?
Well, I'm going to have to go with The Walking Dead.
Nice. Good decision-making opportunities in there for sure.
Yeah, the video game, it was it was interesting because the decisions you make in the game can affect, if you see, are you going to save this one character from being eaten by the zombies? Are you gonna, this guy falls down and you're holding on to him, are you gonna drag him up, or are you gonna let him fall to his death? Because every decision you make has consequences.
Very much so. Very much so. And there are no really easy choices in those games at all.
No. And there's some very traumatic, without spoiling anything, but there's some very traumatic decisions you have to make. And once again, this was, thinking about it, I saw there was a post by the Fright of Your Life podcast on The Walking Dead. And I started thinking back, and once again, being really careful not to spoil anything, how emotionally drained I was after playing it. It was, because you really get caught up with Clementine and Lee, who's I guess her guardian, because he was actually he was going to jail. Was he going to
Yep.
jail?
Yeah,
he
he
going
was
to
in
jail.
the back of a police car at the very beginning of the game, as I recall.
Yeah, and they have the accident when the officer actually runs into like the first walker that they experienced, and he survives the crash and goes trying to figure out what's going on, and then he bumps into Clementine in the treehouse. Just came to me.
Yeah,
That's where
because they
she's
were
hiding.
neighbors, right? Like he was going back to his home to try to find his own family, as I recall, and he ends
Yeah.
up finding her like just down the street or whatever.
Yeah,
I think that's
and
how
then
they
they go
initially
on.
get together, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, they go on their journey together and see lots of sad things. But
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
it's kind of like the Last of Us.
Well, I was going to say, I
Basically,
feel like a lot of video
interdisposed.
games and a lot of other media have kind of cribbed from a lot of the things that were established in that original Telltale game, right? Because I think like that really did a good job of showing people how to make choices very impactful and meaningful in the context of a video game narrative.
Yeah.
Even though I would say there has not been a ton of people who've been able to successfully replicate that, it at least showed the way.
Yeah, well, not like this one. This is it'd be hard to replicate this one. They did a super good job. I mean, their writers were bang on. They were able to like show the horrors, the heartbreak, the hard decisions. It was, and the thing is, it was clever because there's good replay value because you could play. Well, I'm gonna be a dick, and I'm just gonna do all these decisions, boom, boom, boom. And I go, well, that didn't turn out well for me, or maybe it turns out really well. You don't know how the people who made the video game how they word it. So when you come back, you can do it and be nice and try to save everybody the next time, or mix it up. So there's always different outcomes depending on how you play it.
Yeah,
Cool
well,
idea.
and as you kind of alluded to, right, like how you think things are going to go based on your expectations of a typical narrative may not necessarily jive with how things actually end up going, because
Yeah,
there's a lot of moral ambiguity and a lot of gray areas and a lot of like information that you're not necessarily privy to, so that you might be making a decision based on what you know, but that might not, what you know may only represent a tiny fraction of the information you'd wish you'd had.
yeah. Like this guy that you're saving is actually like a crazy man or woman. So it's
Nice.
it's tough because you're playing it and you're thinking, okay, instead of going, what would I do? You're going, what do I think would happen if I picked this choice? But I try not to do that because I was trying to go, me as a person, what would I have done? But it's natural that you're thinking, well, that's great that I would do that, but what's the outcome later on? So I always found myself second guessing and trying to think, well, if I pick this one, what would probably happen? But it's it was clever.
What I think, to kind of wrap it up, I would say one other thing that I think that game did really well is, in so many games in the past, it was always, there was a right choice and a wrong choice. And if you made the right choice, the game continued. If you made the wrong choice, the game ended. But the difference with that game and other similar titles is the game keeps going regardless of what you do for the most part, and you end up having to live with whatever you ended up choosing. And I think that's one of the cool aspects of it.
Yeah. I like the graphics too, because it's a lot different than other video games. It was kind of like being inside a graphic novel.
Yeah, very comic-esque styling to it. Yeah.
So that's cool as well.
Yeah, for sure.
That's The Walking Dead. How about yourself? What are you going to be playing?
Well, I'm going to take a much more of a mechanical slant on this, because I'm always when it comes to video games, I'm very much a mechanics and gameplay over story kind of person, because a lot of my favorite video game experiences are ones where they're kind of built around the gameplay, and then you kind of make your own narrative out of the experience you have playing the game and sharing that experience with other people and that sort of thing. So I was going to talk about a game that I actually picked up right before the fit hit the shan here, which is called Meet Your Maker, which is actually by the developers of Dead by Daylight, which is a pretty popular game that's made the rounds in the meme verse and on the Twitch verse over the past many years. But this game is pretty cool in that I think it has a pretty unique and interesting premise, which is basically that the world has ended and there are basically just a handful of people left who are all basically just clones of a handful of genetic samples of people. And what the goal of the game is that you're basically working with this alien called the Chimera, who is trying to go around to all these different locations on Earth to collect the last untainted, uncorrupted samples of the human genome to try to rebuild humanity. And all of that is basically to create this premise whereby you as the player build these puzzle mazes to protect the little piece of the genome that your facility is guarding, while you simultaneously go out to other facilities that other players have created and try to steal their genetic fragments. And as you can imagine, the storyline or the narrative of the game is really just a means to an end, right? It's a means to explain the gameplay loop. But the gameplay loop is kind of the bread and butter of the experience, which is building these mazes, filling them with traps and guards and little tricks and gameplay mechanics to try to thwart the other people who are coming to steal your stuff, while you're simultaneously going out into the world and trying to take other people's stuff. And as a result of that, like the push-pull dynamic between you as the creator, trying to see what other people have created in their mazes and then apply that to your own to make it more and more difficult for people to get your stuff, creates this really genius, I think, gameplay loop that's really worth experiencing. Like, I think it's one of the most like clever, original, innovative gameplay mechanics that I've seen in a very long time. I definitely would highly, highly recommend people check out the game, even if you don't necessarily think it would be up your alley. I think it's just such a novel, cool concept that everybody should at least give it a chance. And the other thing I'll say before I turn the floor over to you is, if you are into like more cooperative experiences, like if you like doing stuff with somebody else, you can do both the building and the raiding aspects of the game with a co-op partner, which is super fun and like surprisingly way more fun than you might think, especially the building part, because I've like gotten together with some people and built some mazes with them, and that sort of collaborative, cooperative element is really super engaging and satisfying in a way that I wasn't even necessarily expecting.
So this is an online game then?
Yes, yeah, it is an online game. I mean, you can play it as a single player experience, right? Like you can go out and raid the things that other people have built, or build your own things completely by yourself if that's what you want to do. But you never actually play competitively against anybody. Like, it's not like you go to somebody else's base and they're sitting inside it waiting for you. It's more like you go to their base and you have to deal with the traps and the puzzles and all the stuff that they created to try to thwart you.
Oh, okay. It's kind of, it reminds me a bit of like Metal Gear, when you're building your base and setting up all the armaments and having to go over to other people's. And they also have the point where you when you go away, I don't know, maybe it's like this in this game, like when you shut down for the night and you log on the next day, do you see that someone overnight come on and tried to
Yes.
get into your thing.
And that's one of the most satisfying parts of the game is when you've built your maze, and you can actually have multiple mazes of different sizes and put different stuff in them, and they have different difficulties based on how big they are and how sophisticated they are. But when people come and they try to raid you for your materials, that actually gets saved as a replay. So you, as the creator of the maze, can go and watch those replays and see exactly where people got, how they managed to circumvent the things you built. And if they had a co-op partner, you get to see how both of them dealt with it as a team. It's very cool. Like just getting to see that full blown, like moment to moment replay of somebody else actually playing through the thing that you built.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. That sounds like a fun game.
Yeah, I would definitely highly recommend it.
Oh, hey, our planning is pretty good. I think we've got lots of stuff to keep us busy through the apocalypse.
I would say so. I mean, as long as we don't get tired of each other's company and end up going a little gray, I think, we might be in good shape here.
Wonder if we'll ever be able to order pizza again.
I knew I forgot something.
Oh, well. Guess it'll be just peanut butter sandwiches again.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say this until now, but, since we're here, I may have slightly exaggerated the chicken finger situation.
Really?
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot, or there's none?
I don't actually have any chicken fingers.
Well, I'm going back out. See ya!
Congratulations, you just survived the post-mortem report. For more information about the show, the hosts, or the things they talked about, visit our official website at postmortemreport.com. And always remember, good posts never die.
Nice. So I actually think that was a pretty good take, but let's do it again just for the hell of it.
Sip of my water.
Mm-hmm. Could we get Mr. McGillivray's water on set, please?
Yeah, I'm a professional actor. La 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 la.
Yeah.
La 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 la. Alrighty.